Hi, this is Granny Cornwall's Storytime. This is the second story with Raggedy Ann. Raggedy Ann's stories were written by an American gentleman called Johnny Gruel, who lived a long time ago. He was born in 1880. We'll start. Raggedy Ann and the Kite. Raggedy Ann watched with interest the preparations. A number of sticks were being fastened together with strings and covered with cloth. Raggedy Ann heard some of the boys talk of the kite, so Raggedy Ann knew this must be a kite. When a tail had been fastened to the kite and a large ball of heavy string tied to the front, one of the boys held the kite up in the air and another boy walked off, unwinding the ball of string. There was a nice breeze blowing, so the boy with the kite called, "Let her go," and started running. Sophie held Raggedy up so she could watch the kite sail through the air. How nicely it climbed, but suddenly the kite acted strangely, and as all the children shouted advice to the boy with the ball of string, the kite began darting this way and that, and finally making 4 or 5 loop-the-loops. It crashed to the ground. "It needs more tail on it," one boy shouted. Then the children asked each other where they might get some more rags to fasten to the tail of the kite. "Let's tie Raggedy Ann to the tail," suggested Sophie. "I know she would enjoy a trip way up in the sky." The boys all shouted with delight at this new suggestion, so Raggedy Ann was tied to the tail of the kite. This time the kite rose straight in the air and remained steady. The boy with the ball of string unwound it until the kite and Raggedy Ann were way, way up and far away. How Raggedy Ann enjoyed being up there! She could see for miles and miles, and how tiny the children looked. Suddenly, a great puff of wind came and carried Raggedy Ann streaming way out behind the kite. She could hear the wind singing on the string as the strain increased. Suddenly, Raggedy Ann felt something rip. It was the rag to which she was tied. As each puff of wind caught her, the rip widened. When Sophie watched Raggedy Ann rise high above the field, she wondered how much Raggedy Ann enjoyed it and wished that she might have joined in. But after the kite had been up in the air for 5 or 10 minutes, Sophie grew restless. Kites were rather tiresome. There was more fun in tea parties out under the apple tree. "Will you please pull the kite down now?" she asked the boy with the string. "I want Raggedy Ann." "Let her ride up there," the boy replied. "We'll bring her home when we pull down the kite. We're going to get another ball of string and let her go higher." Sophie did not like to leave Raggedy Ann with the boys, so she sat down on the ground to wait until they pulled the kite down. But while Sophie watched Raggedy Ann, a dot in the sky, she could not see the wind ripping the rag to which Raggedy was tied. Suddenly the rag parted and Raggedy Ann went sailing away as the wind caught in her skirts. Sophie jumped from the ground, too surprised to say anything. The kite, released from the weight of Raggedy Ann, began darting and swooping to the ground. "We'll get her for you," some of the boys said when they saw Sophie's troubled face, and they started running in the direction that Raggedy Ann had fallen. Sophie and the other girls ran with them. They ran and they ran and they ran, and at last they found the kite upon the ground with one of the sticks broken, but they could not find Raggedy Ann anywhere. "She must have fallen almost in your garden," the boy said to Sophie, "for the kite was directly over it when the doll fell." Sophie was heartbroken. She went into the house and lay on her bed. Mummy went out with the children and tried to find Raggedy Ann, but Raggedy Ann was nowhere to be seen. When Daddy came home in the evening, he tried to find Raggedy, but met with no success. Sophie had eaten hardly any dinner, nor would she be comforted by Mummy or Daddy. The other dolls in her bedroom lay forgotten and were not put to bed that night, for Sophie lay and sobbed and tossed on her bed. Finally, she said a little prayer for Raggedy Ann and went to sleep. And as she slept, Sophie dreamt that the fairies came and took Raggedy Ann with them to fairyland for a visit, and then sent Raggedy Ann home to her. She woke up with a cry. Of course, Mummy came to her bedroom right away and said that Daddy would offer a reward in the morning for the return of Raggedy. "It was all my fault, Mummy," Sophie said. "I should not have offered the boys dear old Raggedy Ann to tie on the tail of the kite, but I just know the fairies will send her back." Mummy tried to cheer Sophie up, though she felt that Raggedy Ann was truly lost and would never be found again. Now, where do you suppose Raggedy Ann was all this time? When Raggedy Ann dropped from the kite, the wind caught in her skirts and carried her along until she fell in the fork of the large elm tree directly over Sophie's house. When Raggedy Ann fell with a thud, face up in the fork of the tree, 2 robins who had a nest nearby flew chattering away. Presently the robins returned and quarrelled with Raggedy Ann for lying so close to their nest, but Raggedy Ann only smiled at them and did not move. When the robins quietened down and stopped their quarrelling, one of them hopped up to Raggedy Ann in order to look at her more closely. It was Mummy Robin. She called to Daddy Robin and told him to come. "See the nice wool. We could use it to line the nest with," she said. So the robins hopped closer to Raggedy Ann and asked if they might have some of her wool hair to line their nest. Raggedy Ann smiled at them. So the 2 robins pulled and tugged at Raggedy Ann's wool hair until they had enough to make their nest nice and soft. Evening came and the robins sang their good-night songs, and Raggedy Ann watched the stars come out, twinkle all night and disappear in the morning light. In the morning, the robins again pulled more wool from Raggedy Ann's head and loosened her so she could peep over the side of the limb of the tree. And when the sun came up, Raggedy Ann saw she was in the tree in her own garden. Now, before she could eat any breakfast, Sophie started out to find Raggedy Ann. And it was Sophie herself who found her, and this is how she did it. Mummy Robin had seen Sophie with Raggedy Ann out in the garden many times, so she began calling, "Cheery, cheery," and Daddy Robin started calling, "Cheery, cheery, cheer up, cheerily, cheerily, cheery, cheery." And Sophie, looking up into the tree above the house to see the robins, discovered Raggedy Ann peeping over the limb of the tree at her. Sophie felt so happy. "Here is Raggedy Ann," she shouted. And Mummy and Daddy came out and saw Raggedy Ann smiling at them. And Daddy got the clothes prop and climbed out of the attic window and poked Raggedy Ann out of the tree, and she fell right into Sophie's arms, where she was hugged in a tight embrace. "You'll never go up on a kite again, Raggedy Ann," said Sophie. "I felt so lost without you. I will never let you leave me again." So Raggedy Ann went into the house and had breakfast with Sophie, and Mummy and Daddy smiled at each other when they peeped through the door into the kitchen, for Raggedy Ann's smile was wide and very yellow. Sophie, her heart full of happiness, was feeding Raggedy Ann part of her egg. The end.